Greetings class and welcome to Accounting 202. In this video I'm going to go through these problems that we went through yesterday in class and explain them step at a time, and also address those that have multiple steps, even though, as I mentioned yesterday, we will not have an open-ended question where you have to do like 3 or 4 steps. You'll have to do a calculation or whatever, but you won't have to do multiple steps. So to start with, in this first one, we have Janke Incorporated using weighted average method for their assembly department, and they want to know what the costs per equivalent unit are for November for this department. You have the materials here, and the costs and the equivalent units, and conversion costs and equivalent units. So we're going to set up 2 columns. Over here we'll have materials and we'll have conversion. And so we're going to have the cost of beginning work in process for each. And so for materials it's 5,400. Conversion is 3,702. And then we're going to have costs added, and this is going to be 105,682 here, and over here it's 279,810. Okay, so we have a total cost for materials and conversion, and the total will be 111,082 for materials, and the cost for conversion will be 283,512. We're going to divide that total cost by equivalent units, and for materials that will be 10,617. And for conversion it's 10,520. We wind up then with a cost per equivalent unit of $10.47 for materials and $26.95 for conversion. This is a good example of a problem you could probably expect to see something like it from chapter 4. Okay, for number 2, Cadett Incorporated uses the weighted average method in its process costing system, and the following data is concerning the first processing department for a recent month. They have work in process at the beginning of 400, units started of 18,000, and units in process at the end in work in process of 600. And then they say, using the weighted average method, determine the equivalent units. Okay, so basically what we do to calculate equivalent units is start with beginning work in process, and that's 400 units. We do not weight any of these units when we're calculating units complete. And then we have units started, and that's going to be 18,000. So our total here will be 18,400. Then we're going to deduct or take out ending inventory, and the ending inventory will not be weighted either, so that's 600 units. I'm going to show that with brackets here. And so we have units complete of 17,800. Okay? Alright, that's the first step that we need. Now when we're calculating the equivalent units, we're going to start with units complete for materials and conversion. We're going to have two separate calculations because we have the percentages here that are different for each. So we start with 17,800 for each because the units completed are complete with respect to both materials and conversion. Then we're going to add ending work in process, the equivalent units that are complete. So we have for materials, we have 600 times 80%, and that's going to be 480. For conversion, it's going to be 600 times 40%, and that'll be 240. So our equivalent units for materials will be 18,280, and the equivalent units for conversion will be 18,040. So this is equivalent units, and that's what they're looking for here. Okay, here we are at number 3. Musillo provided the following contribution format income statement, and they give us the breakdown of sales, variable cost, contribution margin, fixed expenses, and net income. If selling price increases by $4, sales volume decreases by 300 units, what would be the estimated net operating income? Well, one of the first things you want to do here is take the sales price per unit. You want to compute that. So you have total sales of 180,000 divided by units of 3,000. You get a sales price per unit of $60, and that is a sales price per unit that we need. Then you have the variable cost. You also have to do this with them. You have 126,000 in variable cost divided by 3,000 units. You get $42 per unit. Okay? And then that means the contribution margin per unit is $18. Okay, now in the new scenario, they're going to add $4 to the sales price. So we have in letter A, $60 plus 4 gives us $64 a unit. This is the sales price. Variable cost will remain the same at 42. Nothing changes there. So our contribution margin per unit will be 22. Okay, so now in order to calculate the impact on their income, we could do it two ways. You could actually go back and multiply this by the new volume, which is 2,700. You could do the same here and take the difference, but actually you could just do $22 a unit for the contribution margin times 2,700, and you get the new contribution margin that they're going to have, which in A will be 59,400. Okay, so this is the new contribution margin here. And then you're going to take out fixed expenses that don't change of 52.2. So you have a net income of 7,200. All right. That's letter A. And then letter B, we're going to take a look at this scenario, and it says if the variable cost per unit increases by 6, spending on advertising increases by 3, and unit sales increase by 1,800 units, what will be the estimated net operating income? So in this scenario, we are going to assume all of the things that were here except for what they tell us to change. So the sales price per unit will still be $60. The variable cost per unit will be $42 plus 6, or $48, giving us a contribution margin per unit of $12. Okay. Then they give us the sales volume, which increases by 1,800 units. We started with 3,000. We're adding 1,800. So that means we're at 4,800 units. Okay. So what we're going to do, what we could do, we could go back here and multiply both of these by 4,800 and then recalculate the contribution margin. But the real shortcut in the incremental analysis that we're going to use going forward is just to take the contribution margin times the number of units that we're changing to and create a new contribution margin. In this case, the new contribution margin will be 57,600. Okay, now for fixed expenses, we're going to take the old 52,200 and we're going to add 3,000 to it. So our new fixed expense is going to be 55,200. So under this scenario, our net operating income is going to be 2,400. All right, so that's number 3, parts A and B. Number 4 is going to be a similar problem. And with number 4, what we're looking at here is Stonebreaker. They provide the following contribution format income statement. Everything's in the relevant range. So they give us sales, variable expense, contribution margin, fixed expense, and net income. If sales increased to 9,040 units, what would be the estimated change in net operating income? That's the only change. So for letter A, what we do, the easiest thing that we can do here is just take and calculate the per unit sales price. So we take the sales of 270,000 divided by the volume of 9,000, and we get a $30 per unit. Okay. Then we take the variable expenses or variable costs, which are going to be 189,000, and we divide that by 9,000, and we're going to get $21 a unit. Okay, so then that means our contribution margin here is going to be $9 per unit. Okay, so what they want us to do is figure out what happens if we increase these sales. What's the difference? They're not asking us what the net income is. What's the estimated increase? So we can take this contribution margin times the increase in volume, the increase in sales volume, which is going to be 40. So the increase in units. That gives us a change in net income of $360 in total. So this will increase net income by $360 under Part A. Okay, so here we are at letter B. If the variable cost per unit increases by 6, spending on advertising increases by 3, and unit sales increase by 19,200, what would be the estimated net operating income? So we're going to start here, similar to what we did here. So we're going to have the sales price per unit of $30. We're going to have a variable cost per unit that starts with 21, but we're going to add 6 to it. So we have $27 per unit. Okay. We have a contribution margin of $3 a unit. Now, in this question, they're asking us the estimated total net operating income. So we have to do some additional calculations. Here they were just asking for the increase. So now what we need to do is go back and figure out what the new sales volume will be. Well, it starts out 9,000 units, but we add 19,200 to it. So the sales volume we now have is 28,200. That means that our new contribution margin is going to be 84,600. Okay. And then we're going to have fixed expenses here of 77,000 plus 3,000. Okay. So we have fixed expenses then. When we add those together, we get 80,400. So we have 80,400 and a net operating income of 4,200. So that's letter B. Okay, here we are at letter C. Estimate how many units must be sold to achieve a target profit of 26,100. So we're going to use the target profit formula, which takes the target profit plus the fixed expenses divided by the contribution margin per unit. In this case, it will be 26,1 plus 77,4 divided by 9 per unit. That will be 103,500 divided by $9 a unit, and that will give us a sales volume that we need to achieve in order to get that target profit of 11,500 units. Okay. All right, that's letter C. All right, that's number 4. We'll move on to number 5. And in number 5 here, we have Shell Horse Corporation producing and selling a single product. They have data concerning the product, the selling price per unit, and then the variable expense per unit and the contribution margin per unit, as well as the percent of sales. And they give us fixed expenses, and they say the company is currently selling 4,000 units a month. The marketing manager believes that a $13,000 increase in the monthly advertising budget would result in a 150 unit increase in monthly sales. What would be the overall effect on the company's monthly net operating income of this change? We're looking for the net change in what's going to happen if they have additional $13,000 in monthly advertising expense, and if they increase sales by 84 units. So what we're going to do here, this is going to be an incremental analysis. We're going to start with the contribution margin per unit, which is going to be given to us here at $84. And we're going to multiply that by the new volume that we have, or the increase in volume, which is going to be 150 units. And that will give us an increase in contribution margin of 12,600. So this is increase in contribution margin. The fixed expenses, okay, so that's the first part. And then we have fixed expenses will increase by $13,000 a month. So we compare this 12,600 to the increase of $13,000, and we get a $400 negative effect. So this would be basically a loss. This is the change in net income. it'll be a reduction in net income, not a loss. So we have a change in net income. All right. So that's number 5. Let's move on to number 6. It says Bribon Corporation produces and sells a single product. Data concerning that product appear below. They have a selling price per unit, and variable expense per unit, and fixed expenses per month. Assume the company's monthly target profit is $12,650. Determine the unit sales to attain that target profit. Well, again, we'll use the target profit formula, which is target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin per unit. Okay. So the contribution margin per unit is going to be the selling price per unit of $230 minus the variable cost per unit of $103.50. We're going to have a contribution margin per unit then of $142.20. Okay, so that's the contribution margin per unit. So to plug these numbers into the formula, we have the target profit of $12,650 plus the fixed expense of $518,650. We divide all of that by the contribution margin per unit of $142.20. That gives us a number of units that we need to sell to achieve this target profit of 3,800 units. Okay, so that's in units. Now they ask us, well, the target profit is now $63,250. Determine the dollar sales to attain that target profit. So in this case, the formula will change slightly. We'll have the target profit plus fixed expenses. And we'll divide all of that by the contribution margin ratio. Okay? And the ratio is going to be the contribution margin divided by we can use per unit. So we can say contribution margin per unit of $142.20 divided by sales price per unit of $230. When we do that, we get a contribution margin ratio of 55%. Okay, so we're going to go back and plug these numbers in the formula. So the target profit is now $63,250 plus 518. Where is it? 650 divided by 142.20. I mean 55%. I'm still thinking about letter A. So this is letter B. This is letter A. So this one will give us a total sales volume that we need to achieve of 1,058,000. So this is in dollars, okay? So that's different from letter A, which is in units. Okay, let's go back and take a look at number 7. We're going the wrong way. Number 7 and 8 over here. Okay, so for number 7, it says that the selling price of Old Corporation's only product is $180 a unit. Its variable expense is $38.70 per unit. The company's monthly fixed expenses is $483,480. Assume the company's monthly target profit is $56,880. Determine the unit sales to attain that target profit. Well, if we're looking at that, we're going to calculate again the contribution margin per unit. So we have a sales price of 180, a variable cost per unit of 37.80. That means that their contribution margin is going to be 142.20. Sounds familiar. Okay, now the target profit that we're working with that they give us is this 56,880. The fixed expense is 483,480. So we're going to come over here. We're going to say target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin per unit. The target profit is 56,880. The fixed expense is 483,480. And that all divided by 142.20. Okay? When we do all the math, we're going to come up with a volume of 3,800 units. Okay, so that's number 7. For number 8, we move on to chapter 6, and it says here that ELSA Corporation has provided the following data for its 2 most recent years of operation. They give us variable expenses like direct materials, labor, and overhead, fixed overhead, variable selling and admin, and then fixed selling and admin. And then they give us the production for each year and the sales. Assume the company uses absorption costing and compute the unit product cost in each year. So for year 1, we're going to take the direct materials of 10, direct labor of 7, variable overhead of 3. We're going to add all that up, and that gives us the variable cost, which is 20. But and this is what it would be if we were doing variable cost per unit. So we have the variable cost of 20 per unit. But because we're doing absorption costing, we need to add in the fixed overhead per unit. So what we do then is we calculate the fixed per unit cost by taking the 216 of fixed cost divided by the units produced. Year 1, it's 9,000. So that gives us a per unit cost of 24. So over here we add $24 in to the variable costs, and we get an absorption costing per unit cost of $44. Okay. In year 2, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to follow the same approach. We'll use the same variable costs that they gave us in year 1. Direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead of 3. So we have variable cost of 20. That does not change. Alright? But then we're going to calculate the fixed overhead again. So we take 216, which is the overhead in each of the years that doesn't change between years. But in year 2 we have 12,000 units produced. So we divide it by 12,000 and we get a per unit cost of 18. So then we have the fixed overhead added here of 18. So in year 2 we have an absorption cost, absorption unit cost of $38 per unit. Now these are product costs, okay? And that's what they're asking us for, the unit product cost. So under the absorption method, you take the variable cost and add in the fixed overhead cost per unit. We did that here, and we did that here. And remember, when we're doing absorption costing, we're using the units produced each year. We don't, when we're actually calculating that, that's what we use. Now under letter B, it says assume that they use variable costing, compute the unit cost per year. Well, year one, we've already calculated that up here in part A. So it's direct materials of 10, direct labor of 7, variable overhead of 3, and a total variable product cost of $20 a unit. Year 2, none of this changes. We use the same numbers because they give us the same numbers for each year. So again, we have $20 per unit. Okay. So that's number 8, and that comes from chapter 6. All right, go back over here to number 9. Okay, here we are at number 9, and in this problem, they have a segmented income statement, and they're asking us to calculate break-even in sales dollars and in, well, for all three, for the total company, for home division, and commercial division. So when we're doing the segments and we're looking at the segments, we're only going to look at traceable fixed expenses in the break-even analysis. So to start home division in A, we're going to take the sales of $158,000. We're going to subtract out the variable costs of $66,360. And we will have a contribution margin then of $91,640. Okay, so we divide then the contribution margin by sales of $158,000 up here. And then we're going to get a contribution margin ratio of 0.58 or 58%. Okay, so then we take the traceable fixed expenses divided by the contribution margin ratio that we have. So in this case, it's going to be 69,000 divided by 58%, and we arrive at an answer then for break-even dollars of 118,966. Okay. All right, for letter B, they want to know what that is for the commercial division. So we follow the same procedure. We take the sales of 139 minus the variable expense or variable cost of 51,430 to arrive at a contribution margin of 87,570, and we divide that by the sales of 139,000 in order to get a contribution margin ratio of 0.63 or 63%. Okay. All right, and then we take the traceable fixed expenses from commercial division of 68,000 divided by 63%. We're using the same formula we used up here. That will give us a break-even point of 107,937. All right. Okay. For letter C, they want the overall break-even point. So for letter C, we're going to follow a similar procedure, although it won't be exactly the same. We take the 297 minus, which is the sales for the total company, minus the variable expense or variable cost of 117,790 to get a contribution margin then of 179,210. We're going to divide that contribution margin by the sales of 297 and get a contribution margin ratio of 0.603 or 60.3%. Okay, now with the overall, we're going to do something a little different because we're going to include both the traceable fixed income and fixed. So we have, the formula will be here, we'll have 137 plus 29.7 and divide all of that by 60.3%. So when we add those together, 137 and 29.7, we get 166.7. 137 and 29.7, we get 166.7 divided by 60.3%. And that gives us a break-even point in sales dollars of 276,268. All right, so this covers all the problems we looked at yesterday in class. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me know. Take care and have a great weekend.